In today's video, we're dipping into our metallics for a steampunk look on this BIOMECH butterfly, so stick around. Hello colorists, welcome to PencilStash, a weekly show all about coloring. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing to get all the new content, and be sure to hit that like button if you're enjoying my videos. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another PencilStash adult coloring tutorial. Today we're going to go back to the coloring book Imagimorphia by Kerby Rosanes to tackle this biomechanical butterfly double spread. Now from afar, this is clearly a butterfly, but up close you can tell he's made up of metal pieces, gears, tubing, so I think it'd be really fun to give him a little steampunk flair by mixing metallic and even throwing in some strategic color placement, some pops of color. So we'll be having some fun with depth and shadow on this page since all the pieces are in layers within our butterfly. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Oh, and by the way, all the colors I'm using today are from the full 150 set of Prismacolor Premier colored pencils, but you can use whatever colored pencils you like. Starting with the first phase of our metallic, I'm going to pull some colors I can use to simulate a gold or a brass color, a little bit of bronze, and these will do right here. First I'll do this curved metal piece, and I'm taking each piece sort of one at a time as one complete unit. Doing otherwise, kind of jumping around, would be way too overwhelming, at least for me. Plus, packing a lot of color, a lot of detail into each of these pieces is going to be critical to getting it look just right. And if I focus on one piece at a time, it's much easier for me to do that. Now we'll use yellow ochre to build up our layers, and this one being a great mid-tone or transitional color between the light sand color we just put down and some of the darker ones that we'll be using later. This is our transition color. So you'll just want to feather this into and up against that center area, just building all around it, making sure to leave only the sand color showing where you really want that highlight to pop. And mentioning again that I love that this illustrator has already given us a lot of depth and detail in his pages, so we're going to take advantage and have some fun with that. Now we'll take our bronze color and start to build up the areas we want to be a little bit darker. Again, I'm still treating this as a mid-tone transitional color, as I'll be adding even darker colors still to come after this one. But we're working our way through the gradient, as it'll take a lot of colors to simulate the gold that I want. Now there is a metallic gold pencil that you're more than welcome to use, but it's a lot of fun to add a variety of colors in different shades to get your final look rather than just one pencil, which can read a little bit flat. You'll get a much more dynamic, realistic look with highlights and shading by using a variety of colors. And with this one, I'm primarily focusing this around our edges and in those areas where the illustrator gave us those great shadow lines. Now I might want to use just a bit of the metallic gold pencil just in the corners here, as it has a darker, more tarnished look than the bronze one does. Adds just a little bit of extra interest. For our darkest color, I'll be using Espresso. It's brown, but it'll add real depth to the corners here, adding to that slightly tarnished appearance. And I'm going to just focus this in those corners and those areas where the illustrator put in those shadow lines, those little hash marks. And you likely won't need it, but you can also use your colorless blending pencil just a bit if you wanted to. And again, be careful with this as you don't want to push around your metallic gold or your espresso areas, those darker colors that we put down. You don't want to push those too much into your lighter areas, so use a soft hand with this blender. And there you have it. You're going to replicate this same technique across as many of the other metal pieces or gears that you'd like, choosing whichever ones that you'd like. Now, in terms of placement for me, I wanted the page to feel balanced, so I chose a set number of items from each quadrant of our butterfly to be in this gold color. And I ended up with 10 objects in the 2 top wings and 4 objects being gold in the 2 bottom wings. And I also chose to use gold on the shapes that really kind of defined the bottom edge of the 2 top quadrants, just to kind of differentiate between the top wings and the bottom wings. And using the gold here really helped me to achieve that. But this is just the approach that I used. I always encourage you guys not to copy me, but just to follow your intuition and just kind of place it wherever you feel like it. And this is what you end up with. Now, I noticed later that I forgot to do a 4th gold piece in that bottom right quadrant. Don't worry, I realized it later. And I end up kind of doing that one all the way on the bottom south section of our butterfly. Now, as much as I love the metallics that I plan to be using, I do want to add just a little bit of color just to make some pieces jump off the page, as all of these could easily just kind of blend in with each other. If we used too many colors, it would just be like really busy. So I'm going to add in some pops of green and some pops of blue, again, strategically placed within each quadrant. So let's do a green piece first. And I'm going to start with my lightest color in the green gradient, which for me, I've chosen this bright chartreuse color. And I'm just going to lightly line the top edge of this cone-shaped piece. And notice the bottom half of this piece has those hash marks. So that's the area that I want to choose as my shade area, the darkest area, which means that my highlight should be at the top. And I'm going to work my way down the gradient, next with spring green, remembering to use light pressure and lightly feather into the areas we already placed down that chartreuse color in order to get a smooth transition. And the same with apple green. And finishing it off with peacock green. And with this one, you want to lightly pull the color upwards to loosely mirror and to kind of cover those hash marks that the illustrator has left for us. And of course, you can use the blender if you need it. Now let's do a blue one, using the same gradient technique we've been using, starting with our lightest color, light aqua. Next color in our gradient will be aquamarine. And then peacock blue, making sure you're using very light pressure and feathering this nicely again upwards in order to smooth out those transition areas. and just a touch of Copenhagen blue, which will be our second to last color. This one acts as a great bridge or a great transitional color again between those teal colors that we've already put down, and then the final darkest color that we will be using in a moment. Kind of helps bridge that gap. And finally, Indranthone blue to finish it off. So now we'll speed this up, and I'm just going to kind of strategically show you the pieces that I chose across the page to color in green and color in blue. Now ultimately, I ended up with 5 green pieces in each quadrant and 5 blue pieces in each quadrant. And to keep the piece nice and balanced, I tried to do a mix of small pieces and larger pieces, kind of evenly spread out across each quadrant, again, just to keep it nice and balanced. And here's what it looks like with all our blues and greens added. So now you might wonder, what else are we gonna do with this thing? If we add any more color, again, it might be a little bit busy looking. So what I've decided to do is switch metallics and finish off the rest of the mechanics in gray. And of course, with our Prismacolor set, I have a few different gray families to choose from, namely the warm grays, the cool grays, and the French grays. Now, initially, I thought it might be fun to use all 3 of those families here. Maybe not all in one piece, but maybe I would kind of jump around, kind of alternate. But in the end, I went with only using the cool gray family. Now, I do think that the variety of grays would have been fine here, but I wanted the gold, the blue, and the green to stand out. So going with one color family kind of helps to aid in the rest of those mechanics to fade into the background. And I decided on the cool grays out of those 3 families, just since we're working with cold metallics on this particular page. Now we're going to utilize the exact same technique of gradients on our grays. So we'll start by filling in the large open white space of this piece with cool gray 10%. But now with our grays, we're not necessarily going to go down the gradient from light to dark. We're going to jump around just a little bit to best use the color that suits the piece and whatever shading that it may require. So we'll jump to 70% and we'll fill in some of these corners. Jumping back to 30%, we'll use this to smooth out the transition area between those two colors. Then we'll fill in our corners, our shaded areas, etc. with 90% cool gray. And try not to be too heavy-handed with this color. We want to, again, just make it very nice and natural using circular or kind of orbital strokes, again, feathering it outward so that it's not too harsh. And now, with all the patience you can muster, you're going to utilize all of these techniques on the remaining components of this butterfly, keeping in mind a few things as you go. Number one, remember that there is depth and layers to the gears and the inner workings of our butterfly. So the layers that are closest to the surface would be hit with whatever light source that you happen to decide on. So you'll want to kind of keep a lot more of those lighter grays on those surface pieces. Number two, the layers that are buried. Number two, the layers that are buried a bit would not be hit with as much of that light source, so you'll want to make those a bit darker. Now, paying attention to just little details like that will really lend to the idea of depth on your page. And speaking of depth, number three, all the spaces I would call kind of in between spaces, the areas where there isn't anything, negative space, no gears, no pipes, no pieces, I colored all those with my cool gray 90%. And I could have used black here, but I like that kind of charcoal aspect that the 90% brings, as our black may have stood out just a little bit too much. And instead of standing out, I wanted those negative areas to recede into the background. And finally, number four. This step is going to take you a very long time and it's going to test your patience. And I found that if I focused on one piece at a time, beginning and completing a piece all in one effort without bouncing around the page at all, maybe doing some 10% light gray over here and then kind of bouncing down to the bottom quadrant, doing some down here, keeping it all in one piece at a time made me pay much closer attention to the detail and where to place my colors. Because you really don't want to rush this step. You want to take your time. I did about one quadrant of grays per evening. Any more than that, and I would have either gotten just a little bit too caught in the monotony and I would have lost that detail that I was looking for just out of sheer fatigue, or my fingers would have just hurt far too much to continue. So I did about one quadrant per evening. Just do as much as you can without losing that detail that you really want to keep in this piece. So in the end, this is what I ended up with. Now, next week, we're going to tackle the background of this page by using a medium that I have never tried. Never ever. So check back in the next week to see how it all comes out. Any guesses as to what that medium might be? Leave me your guesses or your suggestions on what I should do in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching today, guys and gals. I have a whole lot more tutorials on my channel, so please check those out if you're interested, and I will see you all next time.